This morning, I have mentioned Maja Ninkovic and her role as a program director at HR Week. So I'm really delightful to announce that she will be moderating the next panel. She's a people analytics expert and a leading voice for the adoption of people analytics practices in organizations. Maja's passion is in connecting people data with successful business outcomes through the design of inspiring people-centric workplaces. Maja is the founder of People Analytics Hub, a global community of researchers, practitioners, and students dedicated to PA and applied workplace research. Currently, she is serving as the global head of people operations in Mito, a fast-growing Swiss startup. Welcome, Maja.
Thank you, Jovana, so much. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and good morning. This was a fantastic, actually, way to start a day. Thank you, huge thank you, actually, to HR World for organizing this amazing event and to our panel of experts. So welcome, Maria, Eric, Lital. Today, we'll be talking about the transformation of HR. Hi, guys. We can see you. Good. Hi. So we'll be talking about the transformation of HR and the role that people analytics plays in that. And both Maria and Eric are keynote speakers today. By the way, great presentations, already touched on that. So I hope that, we can deepen the discussion in this panel today. Okay, so let's jump in. I will briefly introduce each one of our panelists, and then we can go through some of the questions we had for you today. Okay, so Lital helps organizations to improve business performance by making informed decisions about people. She offers executive guidance in the journey towards a data-driven HR, and she also conducts people analytics projects. Lital sources innovation in the HR tech industry and advises startups in this ecosystem. She writes and lectures about people, data, ethics, and the future of work. Great job, Lital, on this. I've listened to you prior to this and actually read a whole bunch of your writings. She leads mentoring and learning programs for various industries in which she shares her knowledge and more than 20 years of experience in people analytics, HR data strategy, and organizational research. Lital's blog, known as Litalix, is one of the first and most influential blogs in the field of people analytics. And her book, this is something I'm particularly excited about. I didn't know about this before this panel. Her book, People Analytics Build the Value Chain, will be published shortly. So glad to have you here today and looking forward to your book, of course.
Thank you.
Maria is assistant professor of human resource management at UCD Michael Smurfit Graduate Business School, University College Dublin from Ireland. She is one of the academic leads in the HR Analytics think tank based in London and the founder and co-organizer of HR Analytics Ireland community of practice and meetups. Welcome, Maria. So excited to have you here.
Thank you, Marjan. Delighted.
Next up, we have Eric. Eric is the founder of the Academy to Innovate HR, which everybody knows is the largest online HR community in the world with over 500,000 monthly visitors from 140 countries. AI HR trains HR professionals in more than 325 of the Fortune 500 global companies. Amazing job. Eric is a globally recognized HR thought leader in digital and people analytics skills, as well as a regular speaker on learning and upskilling in HR. Great. So you guys have all been in people analytics for a really long time, probably even more than 10 years. So you'll probably agree with me when I say that people analytics as a discipline has come a really long way from 10 years ago. In your opinion, and maybe we can start, Lital, from a consulting experience, to what extent has it been successful in really changing and transforming the way HR operates?
Well, so first, I want to say that people analytics is not merely a function or a role within the HR department. It is a mindset that each HR professional should have and leverage to impact both business and the people. And this analytical mindset, which is more common these days among HR teams, is essentially changing the entire sector. But as just as Maria mentioned in her, I love the keynote, people analytics is a long journey. I think that all kinds of significant success and challenges in people analytics are bounded. So let me give you an example. When you deploying a people analytics tool, I think that most organizations succeed when starting to use HR dashboards, and they easily create and use the common new language based on standard metrics of HR. And when needed, HR professionals upskilling themselves as BI tool users. However, significant impact occurs when you integrate data from different sources, both from the HR systems and the business, and when you use advanced analytics with a lens into future outcomes. So although analytics skills have become more common among HR department, machine learning, and it is still challenging for most HR professionals. And this knowledge gap, and Eric, this is a hint for you, it's a serious issue that when considering the available tools in the market, this is a gap that we must close.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Do you want to respond to this?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on the panel, and Maria and Lital, and also very nice to meet all of you. It's it's very nice to be here. As Lital said, I've been in the people analytics space now for the past 5 years, not as long as Lital. So in terms of experience, I bow to Lital. But in terms of upskilling specifically, I think what Lital says makes absolute perfect sense. I think there's two big skill gaps. On the one hand, there's the skill gap for the people analytics units internally, and I think over the past 10 years, I'll talk about the past 5 years. 5 years ago, we started with analyticsandhr.com, specifically focused on people analytics. In the past 5 years, I think the data-driven capability of the people in the people analytics team have increased a lot. I think there's much more conscious thinking about, if you operate, in an early people analytics team. Maria referred to that in her presentation as well. You need to understand analytics, and you need to be a very good stakeholder manager in order to, get data-driven HR off the ground. I think that there's one skill gap in the analytical capabilities, for the specialists who are doing people analytics. But then I think there's an even larger capability gap when it comes to the HR business partners. And if I compare to what I'm seeing, what I saw 10 years ago, what I saw 5 years ago, compared to what we see now, is that I think a lot of people analytics units are, doing the grind and going through a process that Maria beautifully explained, over the years, slow improvements. But that once they're established as a people analytics unit, they start to notice that they get more input from the business, so more questions, about people, about data coming from the business than from HR internally. And I think that's very often where people analytics hits a second wall. Where it's not necessarily a capability wall, they've passed it, but the second wall is very much about making sure that the people analytics insights get adopted in the organization, and this requires a lot of buy-in from the HR business partner. And I think that's the big second wall that HR is now running into when it comes to people analytics adoption. It's how do you get the broader HR population, involved? How do you enable them to read data and to transform data into information? To talk with business stakeholders, in terms of KPIs, and to pick out the projects that could be interesting input for the people analytics unit, and then also these people analytics insights then translate those and give them back to the business. Like the HR business partner is a key, crucial part of the value chain here. And I think that's also a big difference that we're seeing now compared to what I would say 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, there's some great insights there. I agree. Maria, you're actually in a really unique position here at the crossroads between the academic treatment, right, of HR analytics and also practitioners. So what is your view on this?
Yeah, I actually concur with Eric. Like, I think probably Lital has been, of the three of us, the kind of the more experience in terms of seeing a lot of HR analytics functions and journeys. But again, and I'm not going to kind of rehearse the educational piece is really important, I think, and that's why we're all here. I part of that. I suppose I'm going to go even more simple than what we're saying. And I think one of the successes that I've been seeing is to make data accessible for HR business partners. And that piece, which sounds like very easy, but it takes a long time to build a dashboard and a self-reporting function that can serve all of the HR business partners to have live data on their units, their functions, and that can use for the kind of day-to-day decision making. That's something that a lot of HR analytics team have engaged with and have developed, I think, in a lot of organizations. And it has started that educational piece of HR analytics and data-led decision making, because they weren't able to access that data as frequent as they can do it now. Now they can actually build those dashboards around the metric they're interested in, as opposed to whatever is available from the kind of the data manager. So there has been a conversation about data-led decision making already with those HR business partners before the dashboards were built. To me, only that is a success, because you're already integrating that data kind of mindset within the organization. The second one, and I think it's a step even before what Lital and Eric were saying about the connection between HR and the business, which is the end goal, is where ultimately all of this is going to add value. I think before that, what I have seen, which again, it takes time, is to use that integration of data within HR to be able to I suppose, to review the HR function and to revamp it a little bit according to what the data is saying to us. So in other words, HR data, if we have the proper HR data, will help us to align people, processes, and systems. And that's something that not all of the HR functions have it done. And we all like to think that we're strategically aligned, but then if you look at the HR operating model, then you realize that you can always improve that in some way or another. So for me, those two successes are probably kind of maybe low-hanging fruits, if you like, along the journey, but that I have seen them quite frequently. So yeah, and again, I agree. One of the challenges that I was going to comment on is the credibility piece. So there has to be a buy-in from HR, obviously, but also from the business, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Actually, this is quite a good lead into our next question, which is when you're talking about buy-in and credibility, this has been a particularly challenging situation. When I say this, I mean with the whole pandemic, global pandemic. How has actually, what are some of the ways in which HR professionals have been able to leverage analytics in order to help the business leaders orient themselves in this landscape to make better decisions? Lital, do you want to
Okay,
to talk a little bit
sure,
about
sure.
that? Mm-hmm.
So let me answer these questions. Without reviewing the entire tech solution categories that assist the collaboration and the employee's experience. Mm-hmm. When I consider the HR data strategy solely, I don't think that the pandemic actually changed it. Just as before, we have business questions at the top, we have actionable insights at the bottom, and in the middle, we still have a funnel consisting of data from people processes, from sources, storages, analytics, and outputs. Processes remained, and remote work is not a new concept. And even hot topics in the pandemic times like burnout and life balance and mental health, these are all not new in the field of organizational research. And yet I think that the dose of these topics that we analyze is changing. And mainly I think that we have 4 questions that we asked before, but now they get much more attention. And these questions are, how do employees feel? What do employees need? How productive we are and how connected we are. And we can say that these questions are quite common in people analytics case studies that we see in the pandemic times.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I can add to that, I think when the pandemic happened, I think a very nice case study that I heard from someone that we're working with is, when it became clear that the pandemic was spreading on a global scale. That switching point somewhere in, I think it was early March, where everyone realized like, oh, this is going to be everywhere. On that point, there was a people analytics team, and they did it was a global multinational company, and they had people, expats from all over the world, and it was they certainly realized that they needed to repatriate a lot of these expats and bring them home, but you can't bring thousands of people home in the same day. So what they did is they looked at the publicly available data of where are the cases, where are they happening, and where do we have our people, and how can we prioritize the areas that have the highest risk and that also might be at risk of closing down tomorrow. Those people we need to get back today, while the areas that are less dangerous in a way, less risk of shutting down, we can wait a few days before we bring those people home. So that's I think a fantastic case study of how you can once all your data is up and running, how you can then leverage that data to make better decisions in an urgency situation. I think if you talk about the post-COVID world, like Lital said, I think it essentially it will be a business as usual. You have the same problems. They might have shifted a little bit, but it's the same process. It's the same problems that we want to solve with people analytics. I do think there's an added layer. So if you look at the context of work, things have changed. Where I think in more traditional research, we look at an organization, with people being inside the organization. Now, all of a sudden, half or more of half of the people are sitting outside of, inside the organization, but physically outside of the organization. So this context of work has all of a sudden fundamentally shifted. So, how does that impact, your traditional onboarding practices, for example, where, you can't have lunch with the team because, you're onboarding in a totally virtual world. Having the data infrastructure, to look at that, and also for companies that do plan to, go hybrid or move permanently, that I referred to in my opening. For these companies, you need to know what that effective of is of working from home compared to working in the traditional office. And I'm not so sure that there's extensive literature, I don't think so, on making such a shift, and how work happening in a context of sitting at home. This is my workplace. You're looking at it at the moment. I should turn the camera around, but then you get the gist of it. If how much of an impact that will have in on your standard performance management practices, on your onboarding, your recruitment, etc. So I think that's also a very this digital employee experience. There's a lot of talk about the employee experience, but how is the digital employee experience of the employee not being physically in the office? I'd be very curious, and I can imagine more being published on that topic in the near future. As this is becoming hopefully a temporary new normal, but work from home will be happening much more in the future.
Yeah.
If I may add to Eric. In my country, many employees became freelancers and contractors during the pandemic. And the thing is that employees are listed in HR, but freelancers are listed in procurement, but they all contribute to the business. So if we want to analyze productivity or experience, we have an issue here because we don't include everybody.
Interesting. Okay. They're contractors, right, Lital?
Yes.
Right.
And
at least go for it, Lital.
No.
I absolutely agree with it, and it's actually an article that I've been writing recently. It hasn't been published yet, but on the role of the temporary worker, that some organizations indeed put them in the standard HR process. But I taught at university here in the Netherlands, and I worked as a temporary person. I've never been in touch with HR ever, essentially. I didn't know how vacation days, how they worked, all the more basic HR processes. I've never been in touch with them, even though I worked there for 1.5 years, and this is now a few years ago. So I think that's a good example of an independent contractor falling kind of their performance contributes to the organization. If they do a good job, it's good for the organization. I think good companies like Google now, I think, have 40 to 50% of independent workers as their workforce. The flexible workforce is increasing at a fantastic rate. But how do these people fit into the broader organizational structure? How are they managed from an HR perspective and from a data perspective? I think that's an excellent topic and something that we'll read much more about in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so. Maria, Eric was mentioning about this sort of up and coming research into the experience of remote work. From your perspective, do you know of such research? What is the sort of academic focus now as a result of the pandemic?
So yeah, no, I agree with both of them, and Lital has also mentioned that a lot of these concepts have been already in the literature for a long time. So even in remote working and virtual teams, there is quite a bit of a literature already in how fluent communication and cross-cultural management within virtual settings. There is actually a paper that came out in June, which I can share with you, Maja, if you like, but it's about how international HRM can help with kind of remote working. So there is a lot done. I suppose that the changes are more in that I think the pandemic has really accelerated not just an appetite for data, but the need for data to face the emergency. So the businesses are asking for these pieces of mental health, burned out, diversity. So in terms of, I think it has been an acceleration of the use of data, the most probably the progress that the pandemic has brought about. There are other things that are newer, okay, but they're more kind of nuanced. So one of them has been, I suppose, the use of new diversity dimensions. So within those COVID employee engagement surveys, there were new things that were added that maybe it kind of previously remained privately in the kind of more personal domain. So we're talking about, homeschooling during the lockdown, how many children you have in your charge, are you caring for a parent or a sibling or somebody maybe with disabilities or so forth, or maybe somebody, are you more of a kind of a minority group, etc. Those things I think have come to the forefront, and the employee probably was more comfortable sharing that data because they needed the supports. And I think in that sense, like I suppose in contrast with what Lital was saying about, let's be on the lookout for loopholes here in the system, which I agree with her. We need to be careful about treating employees as they are in the employment relationship and not as a transaction. There are other areas where employers have been really, really good at humanizing, throughout the pandemic. I suppose because the virus, like we're all the same to the virus, if you know what I mean. We're all in this together. It doesn't distinguish between employer and employees. So we were all trying to do our best here. That's one of the areas I think of change, hopefully for the long term, not just for the emergency. The other two areas, one of them is digitalization. I think there has been a huge use of passive data in terms of how people engage with digital platforms and how we can measure that in an aggregated way. I don't think there was a need for that before, and now there has been a major need. And then just the third one, and touching on something that Eric has said, is that the office space has all of a sudden become more fluid. And we have realized that for companies, particularly multinational companies, and we're talking about maybe LinkedIn or Google or Facebook's, that have presence in capital cities where they have 5, 6, 7 buildings around the city, then they realize they might not have the need for that. And that is going to change. I think it's going to change the use of real estate and assets in different European cities and around the world. I think changes are really happening in there, but I agree that a lot of the indicators or the metrics that have been used were there already. It's just that maybe people didn't see the need to use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. These are some really great insights. I wanted to ask, we have an audience of HR professionals here. Majority of our audience is interested in people analytics, and we've been seeing lots of people trying to implement people analytics functions and people analytics practices in their organizations. And there's varying degrees, obviously, of success for that. So what I wanted to sort of maybe hear from you and discuss in a little bit more detail is, what are some of the barriers that you guys see to implementing and deploying these people analytics capabilities within the organization and the HR function? And you guys talked about that a little bit in your keynotes. And Maria, actually, you have started with the six sort of sort of areas that we need to pay attention to. So maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into what really do you think is the single biggest barrier, and what are some of the ways in which people can try to start to address it in their organizations?
I think probably for me, and if I'm really honest, with kind of the research that has been done and the experience of other people, to me, it's a combination of two things. One is, unfortunately, a lack of conviction and vision in terms of using data for decision making, and I think it's not to put the blame or anybody on the HR professionals or anything like that, but it's just that perhaps the training that HR professionals undertake is very low in data literacy. So, and I'm saying it because I did business myself, so I'm coming from the same type of background. So we might have this kind of fear of data, or this kind of maybe we find it a little bit daunting sometimes. Whereas if we see it as a tool that we can use to leverage our decision making, and we kind of turn it around, we actually can do a lot more. And I think if we're not convinced as HR professionals, it's going to be very difficult to make a proper business case and proof of concept of HR analytics within the business. So to me, the most, I suppose, challenging barrier would be conviction and vision for HR analytics within the organization.
Right. And Maria, do you think that this is a matter of a skill gap or education training? Is it?
Yeah, like I think most HR professionals, as I said in the presentation, kind of joking, but I actually have heard this in real life, is that HR professionals have been doing their job for years without the need of data. So in a way, it's like, right, why do I need this?
It's like, yeah, it's just an added responsibility.
It's so foreign to me, and you're trying to put me this on, which is like a kind of a difficult discipline, and I don't understand it properly. But as I said, you can always get the skills. You don't have to run a regression. You don't have to do the heavyweight with data yourself. That can be done by somebody else. They can translate that data and the insights for you. But you're actually, it's like if you're half blind and you get these glasses and all of a sudden you see the whole picture. That's what data gives you. So,
Lital, yeah. This is what you've been saying in the beginning about the mindset.
Right. Well, if I may add and be a little bit more provocative, I hear accusations that HR professionals are not analytical enough, and I even read articles that blame HR for the slow growth of people analytics practices in organization. And I do perceive HR as responsible for their upskilling in this area, but I think that the current state is much more complicated. For instance, there are still academic programs that neglect people analytics as a mandatory domain. I think that all programs should cover, like I mentioned before, practical machine learning, the differences between the inferential statistic that we all study and machine learning. I think that when HR practitioner graduate, they are placed in roles which analytical expectations are sometimes not so high. And even if you have seeds of skills and interests, they might decline over time. And beyond that, I think that the entire HR sectors, they relies on consultants and contractors, and unfortunately, even in that professional field, not everybody is updated, and not everybody is interested in changing the state of affairs. And if you consider tech vendors, they sometimes prefer to bypass HR, which also make HR lag. And in many cases, HR is under budgeted. You see it most prominent when it comes to professional development. And then you rely on marketing content sponsored by technology vendors, and this is absolutely insufficient for upskilling and reskilling HR. And obviously, there are private learning programs, and they do a great job in helping HR professionals closing this gap. But I truly believe, as it was mentioned here, that only when you practice your own data, your own organizational data, you can close the gap. It doesn't mean that HR people should start be data scientists, but I believe that they must learn to be great clients of data scientists.
Eric, what are some of the most popular HR courses on your platform? Do you have some data to share with us in terms of, what is actually, the sort of hot skills right now?
Thank you for asking that.
That's a good. I can actually open the numbers. I think right away. If we look at the courses, by far still the most popular course for us is the People Analytics Certificate Program. So that's a program in which people learn on a high level what is people analytics. Now, that was a question we heard 5 years ago as well, but now the question we're hearing today is also, how do I now apply it? And then diving into the data, learning basically everything Excel has to offer, with connecting different data sets, going into tools like Power BI and Tableau to connect different data sources and then visualize it. That is by far the most popular. So it's the very practical course material oriented at creating, the dashboards and the basic, looking back the insights, the descriptive statistics over the when it comes to HR data. What we're also seeing is and I think that fits. It's a bit twofold, because I think a lot of the students that go through it, some will end up creating those dashboards and going more to data analyst functions. But I think also a lot are taking these courses not necessarily to do it themselves and to build those dashboards themselves, but just to become slightly more familiar, slightly more intimate with how do I work with data? Because if once you're at that stage, you're also much more comfortable talking about data, talking to the people analytics practitioner. So I think there's a huge advantage in that. And in terms of broader programs, we also see a lot of interest in upskilling of the HR business partner. And I think that comes relates to what Maria also mentioned. If you talk about the conviction of HR, I think that has to do with a cultural element. So can you create slightly more a data-driven culture in HR? And that data-driven culture, interesting enough, if I'm in the Netherlands at the moment, if you want to become an HR professional, you often study psychology and you get, a year non-stop statistics and numbers. And what students then do, once they pass the classes and they wrote the master thesis, they say, no, I never have to look at numbers again. Now the real fun starts. And I think that attitude is not really. You see that often, but it's good for people, to go back and to realize that the relevancy, of those numbers and actually the regression analyses they did when they wrote their thesis, at least a good understanding of the concepts and the process that you go through, the scientific research process, can also be applied in an organization where you have a business problem, you gather data, you determine your method, you then, do your analysis, you come up with an actionable result. you know, and you can use quantitative data, of course, you know, that's what we're proponents of, but, you know, that doesn't mean that the more traditional qualitative data, you know, the one-on-ones with employees, with managers, getting a feel of what's living in the organization, those are also valid data points, you know, when you're talking about an applied setting, with a much broader scope. And I think building that, you know, data-driven culture where, you know, it's not, you know, you'll still be a people person, you'll still, you know, have that qualitative input, talk to employees, talk to managers, but then adding that quantitative component will just make, you know, a stronger decision in the end, because you have more resources to get information from.
Yeah, and also understanding the qualitative data is also data, right? And so I think that you know, a lot of HR professionals sort of move towards the sort of quantitative spectrum. Okay, we're getting really close to the end of our panel, but I do have to ask the final question. So today is a day that's really dedicated to innovative HR and to HR professionals who are forward thinking. If you can very briefly tell us, what are you most excited when it comes to the future of HR? Maria?
Well, if I have to pick one thing, or maybe a couple of them, would be, first of all, to have a HR function that is proactive and not reactive. So I think the data-driven mindset will bring us to that stage whereby actually HR can help the business to drive their objectives and their strategy. Because, you know, in a lot of organizations, HR is still quite reactive, and not just in smaller organizations, in bigger organizations as well. And the second thing would be to really get a solid seat in the C-suite table. I think HR needs to come up a little bit in terms of its own presence in the executive boards. And I think that data-driven mindset is going to lead HR to get there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lital.
Well, I remember that in one of the first job interview that I had in my 20s, the interviewer asked me, what makes a great manager? And I described someone who can handle both the organization interest and the people interests. And thinking about people analytics domain conversation that evolved in the last couple of years, we are moving from focusing on one stakeholder to another. We started focusing on HR processes. We proceeded with business questions and C-suite level, and we shifted towards employees and teams, and finally team members, team leaders. And I follow the HR tech and people analytics, and I find it fascinating that we can now, in a single button press, we are able to handle so many stakeholders in a way that I could not even imagine 30 years ago when I started my career. But it is important to say that to do it right, I mean, to choose the right tech tools and analytic tools that fit the entire stakeholders of an organization, HR leaders need to have new skills, procurement and AI ethics. And I believe that these skills are very crucial for a future-proof of HR career.
Yeah, and to add, I think those are all excellent points. And to add one thing in the final minute, I would say that the alignment of the digital systems that we have in the organization and the data that we actually work on, because there's a lot of data available, but oftentimes on crucial parts, if you talk about leadership development, for example, how much data do we have really on leadership development or on digital skills? So aligning the systems that you have in the organization to, in the end, feed the crucial data that you need to create informed decision making that creates business value, I think is a very big topic. And I'm sorry for bringing it up in the last minute, but I think it's also something that will be much more of in the near future, aligning your HR technology in order to create the data that really adds value.
This is fantastic. Guys, we have come to the end of our panel. I was really excited to have you, and I think our audience will appreciate all the amazing insights that you have shared and your keynote presentations. I am very happy to host you guys again at some point in the future. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.